Hello there, you are listening to The Screen Queen, where you'll be finding your favorite movie or your favorite television show and learning something new. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to the show, and for the second episode of Action August here on The Screen Queen. So it was bound to happen to cover an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie on here. There's no doubt that Arnold Schwarzenegger has a permanent part of our history, from being Mr. Universe, being an actor, being known as the Terminator, being a politician, and then just pretty much famous for being famous at this point. Like, they named him a president in Demolition Man. You kind of knew this man was not going to go away for quite some time. But when it comes to him being known for a specific role, you could go with any of them. But if you had to ask him what film of his is his favorite, it's True Lies. There's always going to be an action star that has a personal favorite of their own movie, and this film comes up for not just Arnold, but many of the people that have gone on to work on this film. And for obviously a very good reason. I mean, look at it. It's from James Cameron, who was fresh off of Aliens, Terminator 2, and then brought us a remake of a French film that no one was exactly asking for, but now we don't know where we'd be if we didn't know if this film existed. Yeah, it's a little out there. In fact, Arnold's original idea was to cover a different story that was a little bit more mild-mannered, but wouldn't you know it, the idea of what if James Bond had a family peaked a little bit more. So why is this considered Arnold Schwarzenegger's favorite film of his own? Well, I'm about to tell you, because this is True Lies. So for those that have never seen True Lies, oh man, what a roller coaster you are in for that James Cameron has set up. I mean, you thought Terminator was hectic. Oh my God, he said, hold my beer. So we follow a guy named Harry Tasker who leads what seems to be a seamless double life. And he's been doing pretty good at the lies he's been maintaining to make sure that his family knows that he is a salesman that has a boring life and there's nothing remotely interesting, and he's definitely not a spy in his real job. And this is something he's done for 17 years, keeping the world at peace and his family at peace. Everything seems to be going great. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Until Harry finds out that not everything is good in his private life. His wife Helen is having an affair, and this devastates him. And instead of talking it out like a regular human being and using his emotions, he decides to give her an action-packed life to get that spark back in their life, because clearly that was what had to happen. And as much as that's not the greatest thing to do here, this is an action movie, and well, it's a good thing it's an action movie, let's just say that. So when I had to reanalyze what True Lies is, one of the very things that has been mentioned is that it's one of the greatest action comedy movies that had to do with terrorism. And then oftentimes, like, this was another way to, like, make fun of terrorism. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, you always had a terrorist bad guy to defeat. It was kind of on the checklist for action movies, you know, insert terrorist here. I mean, Die Hard made the blueprint and we kept going forward, and True Lies just said, hold my beer, I got more for you. But with this also being a film where your hero was formerly the Terminator, that's also a different twist that kind of ups the film more for credibility that this was a storyteller we've seen from different things take on something a little bit different. Most of the stuff that James Cameron did at that point was just like sci-fi films, so it was nice to see what he could do in the action department and in a different genre altogether. And boy, the A game that he brought to this. This film really does emanate what people want to see in an action movie. It's smart as it is simple in so many ways. You just get to watch the good guys defeat the bad guys, and that's what we've always known. But in time, when you look at the idea of a bad guy, especially a foreign threat, and what that does to another country, especially when you hear about it more in the news, it does change how that can be brought into fiction. When 9/11 happened, there was a complete change for how terrorism was going to be depicted into films. There was no way to loosely just put up whatever storylines without having to think about the echoes of a tragedy that we had in 2001. So when James Cameron was asked, when is True Lies 2 gonna come out? And he put a stop to it immediately and said, terrorism just isn't funny anymore, and I don't want to mess with it. And he's right. I mean, there was never nothing funny about terrorism, but if you had to find a way to make it funny enough without going too offensively or making it that we can feel what the danger is, that's storytelling done right. This is a fictional film where all we have to know is that the bad guys are defeated by the good guys, like we know from every single movie. And that's what makes True Lies age a little bit better, because we always have the good guy save the day. But this is a film that's also just going to have to exist as a time capsule, because we're not going to have another thing after we've already had tragedies that there's not really a way to make fun of it. We just have to accept what's happened and just move on and be a little mindful about how we depict certain things in the media. And James Cameron was one of those first people before we started really analyzing it a lot better. And it makes me respect him a whole lot more than I did, knowing that he wasn't willing to sell out and make something for the sake of making something and not thinking about how that's not going to translate to today. How many people think about what the after looks like? And he did. But did that stop anybody from looking at True Lies and going, hey, that worked? Oh yeah, there was a remake made of this remake. True Lies was eventually made into a television show. So this thing was remade twice. It was a French film first, then James Cameron got a hold of it and made it great, and then TV did not do any favors. That thing has abysmal reviews, and it's not even close, not even a shred to what it's trying to be. A remake is supposed to do something different, but different good, not different It ended up having Van from Reba, I think he has a name, Steve Howie, playing Arnold Schwarzenegger's role, and listen, I like that guy. He was great on Shameless, but to choose him as Harry Tasker, I mean, come on. Ugh, it didn't seem right. And oh yeah, it's missing this key ingredient called chemistry. And that was also a big reason why True Lies was so successful, was the instant chemistry that everyone had with each other. It was bleeding with sweetness. I practically got a cavity with how much everyone got along with each other in this movie. But this film that was literally crafted to perfection back in '94, there was no room to leave anything unturned to make this a perfect comedy action movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger was at the helm of this film, trying to churn it and keep it going, and then trying to find the other people that would fit the part. Everyone had to make sure that they were good for the role, but there was some uncertainty for how they wanted to choose who they wanted. And originally, before Jamie Lee Curtis was going to be known as Helen Tasker, it was on the fence if she could play Helen Tasker. There was doubt, and I don't know why there was this allergic reaction to Jamie Lee's talent back in the 90s, because the same thing happened in Halloween, but thank God Arnold came to his senses and realized that he had pure talent he was looking at, and that he has Helen Tasker right there. But one of the actors that they weren't counting on then it being a big part of it was Tom Arnold. I just named two big people in Hollywood, and one that people are continually trying to forget about. And yeah, Tom Arnold has a bit of a rank history in Hollywood, but this film really does fit with him. I have to go on a limb and say that I really like him in this movie. Like Andrew Dice Clay has A Star is Born as his redemption movie, I wouldn't exactly call this the same thing, but it's close to it. Even though Tom Arnold has had a pretty staining existence in Hollywood, including the whole pre and post relationship with Roseanne, and then he has his own shtick in comedy, but this one little thing that he did ended up being bigger, and even he didn't see it coming. Tom Arnold being in this movie was an accident all the way. If there was ever a way to say an unplanned baby, Tom Arnold was the unplanned child in this movie. He literally walked into James Cameron's office just to meet him. He wasn't looking for a handout. He literally was having a fanboy moment and wanted to meet the guy that did Terminator and Aliens. Who could blame him? And wouldn't you know it, it's True Lies audition time, where Arnold's going over all the notes and he just wanted to stop by and say hi, and then James Cameron was like, wait a minute. Arnold Schwarzenegger got to talking with him and their chemistry clicked. And James Cameron saw something that no one would ever call magic. But he did, and told Tom Arnold, would you like the role of Al? And he walked away like, how did I pull that off? He had his own moment like Tommy Lee Jones did, winning the Oscar for The Fugitive. Like, y'all gonna give me that? Every time I see his scene in the movie when he's almost gonna be shot by the bad guy, and by all means, him hiding behind a pole does not make any sense. But every time he kisses that pole for unnecessarily saving his junk, I absolutely get asthmatic with laughter. Even the tidbit where Al goes on to rant and can take her on about how, what sick twisted bitch takes the ice cube out of the ice cube tray? Because Roseanne did that to him and he brought it up in the divorce and it made it to the movie. So that's literally divorce tea. But another part of this film that was unexpectedly great, because of course it was unexpectedly great, Bill Paxton. Everyone has a beautiful part to play in this movie, even armpits of comedy like Tom Arnold. Though Bill Paxton was a national treasure and I miss him every day. Every time he pops up in one of James Cameron's films, it feels like the epitome of sportsmanship. There has been a long-time collaboration between James Cameron and James Arnold Jesus Christ, excuse me. Between James Cameron and Bill Paxton since their first collaboration before they were even names anywhere else. They basically said, hey, I have a thing, do you want to help me? And said yes, like bros all the way. So when it came time for Aliens, he was down. Came time for True Lies, he said, tell me what you need, Jamesy boy. And it is beautiful how much Bill Paxton poured into every film. There are so many productions that have said that Bill Paxton was one of the best things in very bleak moments. He always made everyone feel contributed to and accepted and felt like they weren't alone. So to see him playing such a smarmy ass is absolutely hilarious, because it still has some shred of charm to it that makes it like a likable smarminess. Like, not even David Spade could be that kind of likable smarmy, and he's literally smarmy. The character that he plays is a hilarious counterpart. You could put any kind of sleazeball in there, but you get someone that knows how to play a funny sleazeball, it's Bill Paxton. But that does bring me to my next point that I found when I was watching this movie again, is I feel like everyone had their moment. This is, by all means, Arnold's film, like, all the way through. It's his personal favorite for a reason. But everyone had a part to play that made them feel just as important as Harry Tasker is. Al has his moment. The character Hasil also has his moment. Helen has her moment. Dana has her moment. It makes it's not all about Harry Tasker. I mean, it's supposed to be. That's a reason why we're here, but there are moments that you can really see how these people exist in Harry's life by getting to know them or how they talk about him, because the whole point is, what do people think about Harry? The ones that truly know him, like in the CIA, are the ones that think they know him, so they're basing off of what they've seen for 15 years. Like, having these characters established, it does make the true and lies part kind of come together in a way, and it's because they have strong characters to uphold that title. No one is sleepwalking in this movie, and everyone is so interesting that you believe this whole world. Like, I feel almost gullible at the times that I know what this plot is about, but I keep falling for everything every single time. When Harry finds out that Helen is having an affair and he's walking across, even though that's the whole reason why we're here, I'm like, no! She's cheating on him? No! Later on, when Dana gets kidnapped, I'm like, Dana? Like, should make me feel stupid, but that's the brilliant thing about this movie is I feel like I'm watching it for the first time every time. But since this was for the sake of reviewing this movie, it almost feels like I'm watching two different films. In the first 40 minutes before we really get into the True Lies portion of the movie, I legit forgot that's why we were here. I got so invested with him going after the terrorists and getting involved with this life and the world building in it that when it finally came time that we have to take a dip away from the action and then see him include his wife in his life that was not supposed to be meant for her, it does kind of feel like you went off course and it's like, where are we going? What's happening here? It's kind of like you're on a roller coaster and then you end up getting aligned into a different roller coaster. But then that's where I have to say the plot out loud, and it gets a little bit weird, and over time there's been many other critiquers and reviewers that have had to see this portion of the reality of the plot to be a little creepy. It's a man, I actually wrote this down because this is a movie about a man who abuses his power of the law, its enforcement, and a government agency to basically put his family in danger because of him. Because he wasn't present, all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, I'll make them be more present. It's like, no, you had these two things separated for a reason. As much as that does work out very well, but when you look at it and have to say it out loud, like, that is a psychotic decision. That, when Al has to call him out on it, you know it's bad if Tom Arnold has to be the guiding voice of reason. That's terrible. But that's where it being a comedy saves it from looking too creepy. Everything kind of teeter-totters a little bit where the joke is given and there's a fitting resolve for everything. It does have its saving grace from the absolute horrible things. Like, if you were to really look at Harry Tasker existing in real life, there ain't no way he's gonna get a slap on the wrist for basically putting his family involved in a mission and blackmailing his partner, taking a government plane. Oh, I know that's definitely going to be adding some years. There's too much true crime that can evidently say there's no way Harry Tasker could get away with this, but it's a comedy, so he kind of does. It's like when you have to look at Mrs. Doubtfire and realize, okay, that exists as a comedy for a reason, but legit, Mrs. Doubtfire and True Lies need to be in the same room together to talk about their problems. And with it being an action movie, there is an allowment to turn your brain off and just enjoy the fact that nothing is supposed to make sense and you're just supposed to see the day being saved. Given the time frame that it is, there's a little bit of forgiveness and just a little bit of awareness that goes into it. But there is a part of this movie that, I'm just going to say it just didn't age well at all. But everything happens in time. And True Lies is no different than anyone else has to come forward about a terrible crime that gets committed. So with that said, I have to give a heavy content warning that what I'm about to tell you is a sexual assault allegation that has been tied to this movie. Eliza Dushku, that plays Dana Tasker, was molested by a stunt coordinator. And because this 14-year-old stood up for herself, this led to a physical injury that you can see in the movie. When Dana is clinging for dear life, there was no physical safety, nothing at all, helping this 14-year-old girl who's literally be dangling by the person who is essaying her. It is disgusting, the fact that exists in there. And in 2018, Eliza Dushku finally told what happened and revealed the name was Joel Kramer. And then, of course, the guy turned around and said, I didn't do anything, you can't prove anything. Like, really? Then why is there a 14-year-old busted ribs that could have definitely been prevented? It's disgusting. So having to rewatch the movie and knowing what happened to her, it puts a bad taste in your mouth knowing a 14-year-old was subjected to this, even though I do love this movie. And there are some great parts to it. But that cannot expunge a terrible crime. It's a dark thing to have to talk about, but at least there is one good thing. Eliza Dushku eventually became a therapist And even though she didn't get her justice, but she definitely got her peace. So, now that part is done with, I want to move on to the action portion of talking about this action movie, because I have some action highlights for you guys. My first action highlight is how Helen's gun backfires. That is like peak comedy and action at its finest, and it just goes to show you, you don't need to have a big giant shootout. You can just let the gun do it for itself. Like, anything that ends up making it like a complete screwball comedy with a gun, you know, if you're making me laugh, you're doing something right. There are not many good gun jokes like that, and I can't even think about how many good, like, gun humor things like that work, and this one just does. And Helen panicking is just the icing on the cake. Like, she got her moment, and well, at least she gave it her shot. My next highlight, this is a no-brainer, the bridge scene. That is the most crafty, chaotic, comedic bit. I don't know where it ranks, but it should rank in at least a good top 10 section somewhere. Like, that is just art at that point. First, the terrorists in the transport truck that are dangling in midair, and what befalls them is a bird. Anytime that you throw an animal that puts everything into chaos, it's free laughter. It just is. We didn't need that, but someone made that happen, and now they are my hero. Helen fighting Sloane in the car, it's like having a fight jump to a fight jump to a fight, which sometimes can feel like an overdose, but if it's well done and your name is James Cameron, it works out wonderfully. One lump, how about two? Just, that could have been cheese, but no, Jamie Lee made it gold, or should I say gold. That was not great, but you know, I tried. And then finally, the bridge is out. Seeing Helen and Harry try to tell each other the same sentence, it can be annoying as sin, but if it's comedically done right, well, that is exactly what that looks like. But also, as an added bonus of trivia, when Harry successfully got Helen out of the limo and she's just dangling up there in one of the greatest scenes that you just have to sit back and admire, Jamie Lee Curtis did that on her actual freaking birthday. Yeah, she said, "Let's do it. I want to be dangling from a helicopter by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's how I'm celebrating my birthday. You go, girl." And then for a third highlight, and this is probably one of my favorites to share because of what I found out, the bathroom brawl from the beginning. When Harry is going after your, avant-garde, insert bad guy here, I mean, it's always one hell of a fight. If you don't have a first interesting fight, where is your action movie? But I found out the wildest thing. The guy that he fights in that bathroom brawl is a ballet dancer. Now, this is not something that not too many people know, but when you put the pieces together, it makes sense. Ballet performers or ballet dancers are often in action movies because of the physical requirements. I mean, if you have to lift someone up, in this case, toss someone or calculated moves, like that does make sense to try and get someone that would be able to handle that kind of physique. And well, man, this guy's resume looks awesome. My goodness. But knowing that, it makes the fight more impressive for how everyone was giving their... And knowing that, it makes the fight more impressive. The way that the fight is extremely calculated, the action goes hand in hand with the fight scenes, the bathroom is used as its own weapon, everyone is basically destroying this bathroom and trying to destroy each other with the bathroom. Anything that utilizes the environment and turns it into absolute chaos is doing something right, as an action film should. Every place is supposed to be unsafe and everything is supposed to feel like it's an instant weapon. And for the way that all three of these scenes are perfectly layered between action and fighting and absolute chaos, like that's just a beautiful work of chaotic art. So I've mentioned how this film ages, but it was funny how this film was censored back in the day, which again hurts to have to say that. So in like 2015, 2013, when True Lies was being on like AMC or A&E, and I've talked about this before, but A&E is like the biggest, stupidest offender to movies in general. So for those that probably don't know what I'm talking about, since networks are slowly dissolving, A&E was a network that played a lot of action movies and crime things, and it also was what I would call the grandpa network because most of the people that were watching the network was in the demographic of 60 or older. So can you imagine True Lies in all of its bearing glory being seen on there? No. Unfortunately, not. During the scene, the sexy scene when Helen does her little striptease for what she doesn't know is actually her husband in the shadows, the biggest crime against humanity A&E committed. They blurred out Jamie Lee's butt. I have never forgiven A&E for that crime that they committed. Why would you cover that up? Now, AMC, on the other hand, they actually had no choice but to cut some parts of the scene out because it was starting to question how that was going to be teeter-tottering on the way you can get away with nudity. And back then, I mean, Jamie Lee's butt was just a little too much for TV. Well, I say it was perfect for TV, and TV just couldn't handle that. That's what I say. So I wanted to give a spotlight onto the villains. On one hand, you have a character like Aziz, who is, for lack of a better way to put it, just the usual norm of a villain. So on one hand, you have Aziz, who is your villain for the movie. But Aziz is kind of like the villain you see in every movie. I have watched action movies for a majority of my existence, and that has always been the occurring element, is that the good guy is fighting a bad guy who is doing something for another country. And sometimes that can age really good or really bad. In this case, Aziz was just sort of a sign of the times that were going on. That was the way things were in the 90s when it came to viewing foreign threats. So when it was being propelled into movies, it was like just the way it was. Nowadays, we're a little bit more aware about the way we see villains and trying to make things different for the action genre. But for what it's worth, the guy does a very good job playing a very violent villain that you do want to see have a downfall. But since he parallels a part of reality into this fictional universe, you know, it just can kind of be seen as repetitive and a sign of its own times. And then you have a villain like Juno Skinner, who is the evil Bond girl, as I would call her. I mean, the way that this is meant to be a film of what if James Bond had a family, and then you have a seductress-like character like Juno, who is by all means going to get what she wants, but girl is smarter than people give her credit for, and way more shallow than people would ever think. Even she has to reveal her big plan, that all these priceless things that she was saving everything for, and it's like, whatever, goodbye. She does not have penitence for her actions. She's willing to sacrifice Helen and Harry for the sake of getting money. Anybody that has a reaction of so when it comes to destruction and morality being gone, I mean, that practically spells villain in my book. But with her existing with Aziz as these partners, in a way they kind of counterbalance the way the villains work in the movie. You do have Aziz, who is the bigger threat, and then you have Juno, who is going to make sure that the chaos happens. Like, there's different sides of threats going on. And it fits for the ambiance of the movie, having a threat every single time you look around. There's not too many duo villains that work very well together, and this is kind of one of those underrated duo villains in my book. But also, Tia Curry would eventually go on to play Nani in Lilo and Stitch, so having to hear her in this movie, it throws me off every time. Every single time. Like, this girl has a mad talent. And for an additive bonus, the fact that these villains both went on to Disney movies. Art Malik went on to go play Grimsby in the Little Mermaid live action movie. So when I went to go see that, I was like, what are you doing here, Aziz? Who is the wildest thing to find out. And then I do have one more little bonus about the villains, that these guys really got into character. So much that James Cameron actually had to get involved. In the beginning of the movie, when Aziz is playing the role of the, naive, oh, Miss Skinner, what do you want here? And, all the chauffeur, Harry Tasker, or Harry Rainquist, as he was said. But when he leaves, he slaps Juno in the face. And it's like, oh shit, alright, dang, they're in this together. But it's when Aziz smacks her again that James Cameron is like, alright, that's enough. He was told he could get into character, but when it got to a point that there was unexpected, hard-hitting slaps to Tia Carrere, like, at some point it's going to go bigger than the other one, and James Cameron was like, yeah, nah, you're not doing that. Well, so I'd have to say the setup for the affair they have in this movie, as much as I hate adultery setups, this is by far one of probably the best setups you can have for something that can be a joke, but then a parallel. It's kind of like all rolled in one. But then when you think about it, this whole thing is played out twice in the same film, just with people in different positions of it all. With this being a film called True Lies, of a man that's lying about his whereabouts because he's actually a spy, and then his own wife is having an affair with someone who is lying about being a spy, it's like, oh wow, the joke wrote itself. But then that joke is basically what kind of thrusts that movie forward into the whole chaos. But the parallel of Harry and the guy Simon, it is hilarious how much one is more nonchalant and almost over the top than the other. With Harry's job as a spy, it's just like, oh, this is a Tuesday, it's whatever. There's avant-garde things that happen. But then there's Simon, who takes it to a very stupid way that anybody could see, wow, this man is an absolute fraud and he's no good. It is absolutely hilarious knowing this is what it's fallen for, that this is the guy that Helen falls for, this dweeb. Harry ends up abusing government officials because he got butthurt over a dweeb. It's like, Harry, come on, man. Does it really know that stuff for that? But therein lies how that is fitting. A dweeb like Simon getting a spy like karma to the lies that he made, like that, even though he's not the focus, but it's a fracture of it, that whatever you say does come back to bite you in the ass. It's kind of like a nice little foreshadowing. But then there's Helen's role in this entire parallel, because she is really the center of how everything ends up completely coming into effect. She's the reason why Harry wants to put her involved with his life while still lying to her, because true lies. And then there's Simon, who wants to sleep with her because he's literally navel-lint, as he says. These are two people that sought after her, and then she ends up kind of being bigger than both of them because she had her own individual thing going on that she needed to have happen for her. When the spy reveal first happens, she's terrified out her gills, more than the schmuck called Simon. But it's in the progress of the film where the same thing gets played out, and she gets to go on her mission, and she ends up being the woman that she says she wants to be, and does. Given she's literally traumatized to be there, poor thing, but nonetheless, the entire scenario that she was originally talking about ends up happening in a better way than she could have predicted. More chaotic as well, but still. The way her parallel is extremely powerful, that you do want to see how is the same thing going to play out better, and it does. The way that the lies kind of fall on top of each other, and it really does make the spy feel a lot more real, knowing how do we throw someone in here who has never even thought about that. We think about, what if that was us? And, well, Helen kind of feels with the representation of what that is like, if that situation comes up for someone. But to kind of wrap up this movie, I want to talk about the last part of it, and I gotta say I'm a little tight on it. There are so many layers this movie goes through that it feels like you go jump onto another roller coaster and ride that one out. But then you found out the roller coaster's a little bit longer, and it's like, didn't we go through like several thousand rollers on this coaster? The kidnapping of Dana felt a little last minute. Now, I have to preface that I do not know anything about the original True Lies, if that was actually in the plot. But when you are looking at layers of a story, that is such a taxon. When I saw this at 15, I first of all forgot that Arnold had a daughter. But then that she's in trouble, it's like, oh, I mean, really? Does she have to be in trouble? Like, we just did all that stuff. Like, I want her safe, but I didn't think about that happening in the end. And it is absolutely terrifying what Dana goes through. And it does kind of make it feel full circle that, like I said, the whole family ends up inadvertently getting involved because someone decided to meddle instead of me communicating the right way or whatever. But whatever. Harry saved the day. But Harry saved the day the entire time. This could have been left out, and it also leads to one really weird part of the movie that I found out. So, James Cameron was struggling with this last part of the film and trying to get it to go. He hired a whole bunch of writers and ended up letting them go, but wouldn't you know it, one of them made one line that made it into the movie, and that was, "You're fired." Yeah, a throwaway joke ended up becoming the final line, which should have been way more better, but since this already feels like we're just really getting taxed at the end of the road, it was just basically splat on just to get us on home. But before this episode dances on out of here, there is one little last bit of trivia that I would not have forgiven myself if I didn't share it. So in the 90s, there was a bit of a reoccurring element with a dance number called Por Una Cabeza. Now this was famously done in Scent of a Woman when Al Pacino danced. And after that was done, Por Una Cabeza was selected again. But when people mention that, they're like, well, you know, Scent of a Woman did that really good. Don't be messing around if you can't do the Por Una Cabeza. So Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis trained for the dance numbers. Now Arnold does it twice. Jamie Lee only is at the very end of the film. But since she did all that stunt work and this is not exactly her forte, well, I mean, unless you've seen Perfect with John Travolta, that woman can dance, but when you're in an action film in the dance, you know, your energy is going to be depleted. So at the very end, during the credits, when Helen and Harry are dancing, Harry is just dragging Helen across the floor, and looking at it, it's like, oh, that's a unique dance number. No, Jamie Lee was tired as hell, so she just literally did whatever she could with what energy she had left. And as much as James Cameron is a bit of a perfectionist, he was like, you know, that's something Helen would do. I'll keep it. So for my final little musings about True Lies, I mean, it's a James Cameron film. Of course I'm going to expect greatness. Not everything in this film is going to be 100%, but there's always going to be some parts of a film that something comes through the grapevines. But for what it is, for how it's existed, and just getting to exist in 94, it did a good job. It gave recognition to a French film. It boosted up Jamie Lee again. It gave so many careers a takeoff. It gave redemption to a comedian that desperately needed one. And this is the one that Arnold Schwarzenegger has said is his all-time favorite film of his own. And I can see why. It's set up great. It's set up weirdly, but for its time period and for what it is, it's a spectacle of what storytelling can be like. And it's one of the most different spy films to ever be seen. They didn't do something like other spy films, but this was one that took a different direction than the usual ones. I'm all for getting to see a film that's willing to go outside the box, and True Lies was willing to do that. And, you know, there's nothing lying about that. Alrighty, so that is going to be a wrap on this second episode for Action August. So here are your 3 hints for what the next episode is going to be. This one came out in 1993. It is a sequel to a franchise, and it has Mel Gibson in it. And that is all you're gonna get. So until then, thank you so much for listening to The Screen Queen. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. I am also available on YouTube. If you just type in The Screen Queen, you should find me with my little glitchy glasses staring at you while you're listening to an episode. And I also am a writer, and I created a book series called Inglorious Ink. And if you are interested in seeing what that little chaotic adventure is about, it is available on Amazon, and I have the information in the description box below. Thank you so much for listening. You all take care now and stay amazing. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!